Hey kiddos, so we just left Peter and Susan with the professor, and they were getting some answers that they did not expect, right? So here's the professor. He's old. Remember, he's got gray hair and a scruffy beard, and he's in this big old house, and they go to him because their mom and dad aren't there. So they figure, let's talk to the professor. And so his answer was either Lucy is lying, which they hope she's not lying, and or she's mad or crazy. They know she's not crazy. Or the third thing he said was, maybe she's telling the truth. They were quite puzzled by that. Let's see what else he has to say. Susan looked at him very hard and was quite sure from the expression on his face that he was not making fun of them. But how could it be true, sir? Said Peter. Why do you say that? Asked the professor. Well, for one thing, said Peter, if it was real, then why doesn't everyone find the country every time they go to the wardrobe? I mean, there was nothing there when we looked. Even Lucy didn't pretend. There was nothing there. What has that got to do with it? Asked the professor. Well, sir, if things are real, they're there all the time. Are they? Asked the professor. And Peter did not know quite what to say. But there was no time, said Susan. Lucy, she had no time to have been gone anywhere, even if there was such a place. She came running after us the very moment we were out of the room. It was less than a minute, and she pretended to be gone for hours. That was the very thing that makes her story so likely to be true, said the professor. What? If there really is a door in the house that leads to some other world, and I should warn you that this is a very strange house and I know little about it. If, I say, she had gotten into another world, I should not be surprised to find that the other world had a separate time from its own. So that however long you had stayed in one place would take up no time at all in our time. On the other hand, I don't think that many girls of her age would invent an idea for themselves. If she'd been pretending, she would have hidden for a reasonable time for coming out and telling her story. So what he was saying is like, if she was pretending, she would have faked it better, right? But she wasn't pretending. But do you really mean, sir, said Peter, that there could be other worlds all over the place just around the corner like that? Nothing is more probable, said the professor, taking off his spectacles and beginning to polish them, while he muttered to himself, I wonder what do they teach in these schools? But what are we to do? Said Susan. She felt the conversation was beginning to get off point. My dear young lady, said the professor, suddenly looking up with a very sharp expression at both of them, there is one plan which no one yet suggested, which is well worth trying. Oh, what is it? Said Susan. We might try minding our own business. And that was the end of the conversation. So that conversation with the professor was not anything like what they thought it was going to be, was it? After this, things were a good deal better for Lucy. Peter saw to it that Edmund stopped jeering at her, and neither she nor anyone else felt inclined to talk about the wardrobe at all. It had become rather alarming subject, so they decided not to talk about it. And so for a time it looked as if all the adventures were coming to an end. But that was not to be. This house of the professor's, which even he knew so little about, was so old and famous that people from all over England used to come and ask permission to see over it. It was a sort of house that was mentioned in guidebooks and even in histories, and well might be, for all manner of stories were told about it, some of them even stranger than the ones I'm telling you now. So people would come and visit. They would come and take a tour of the house. And when the parties of sightseers arrived and they asked to see the house, the professor always gave them permission, and Mrs. Macready, the housekeeper, showed them all around, telling them about the pictures and the armor and the rare books in the library. Mrs. Macready was not fond of children. You remember that? And did not like to be interrupted when she was telling visitors all the things that she knew. She had said to Susan and Peter almost on the first morning, along with many other instructions, "And please remember, you're to keep out of the way whenever a party is over the house." So whenever she was taking people on tour, she was like, skedaddle, stay out of the way, don't be interrupting. It was kind of her thing. She liked to show off the house. Just as if any of us would want to waste half the morning trailing around with a crowd of strange grown-ups, said Edmund, and the other three pretty much thought the same. That was how the adventures began for the second time. Oh, goody, goody. A few mornings later, Peter and Edmund were looking at the suit of armor and wondering if they could take it to bits, and when the two girls rushed into the room. So they're sitting there trying to figure out, can I take this apart? Can I break this into bits? How can I take this apart? Boys, always trying to put things together and take things apart. It's pretty cool. "Look out, here comes the Macready and the whole gang with her." "Sharp's the word," said Peter, and all four made off through the door at the far end of the room. But when they got out into the green room, beyond it into the library, they suddenly heard voices ahead of them and realized that Mrs. Macready must be bringing her party of sightseers to the back stairs instead of up the front stairs as they had expected. And after that, whether it was that they lost their heads, or that Mrs. Macready was trying to catch them, or that some magic in the house had come to life and was chasing them into Narnia, they seemed to find themselves being followed everywhere. So they were going one way, they hear something. Going another way, they heard something. Remember all those staircases up and down and back and around? Until, at last, Susan said, "Oh, bother those trippers here. Let's get into the wardrobe room." Till they've all passed. No one will follow us in there. But the moment they were inside, they heard the voices in the passage, and then somebody fumbling at the door, and then they saw the handle turning. "Quick," said Peter, "there's nowhere else." And he flung open the wardrobe, and all four of them bundled inside, and they sat in there, panting in the dark. Peter held the door closed, but he did not shut it, for of course he remembered that every sensible person does, that you should never shut yourself inside a wardrobe. But there they were, inside the wardrobe. What's going to happen? What do you think? Do you think the people outside will find them? Or do you think they'll find something else? See you tomorrow.